So Apple just released their new iMacs, finally. This is just about 6 to 7 months too late for the 8th gen processor update, although they did also release it with the 9th gen processors. But you can get all those little BS information from anybody else. I don't really care. I want to talk about what should you do now? Like what should you do if you want to purchase a new Mac from Apple or from Amazon or whatever. So let's begin. First, I want to preface this by saying, obviously, the way I do computers and the way I purchase computers is used. It's been very well documented on my channel, but I do think there's a place for new computers because some people just need to buy a new computer, I guess. I mean, some people are more comfortable buying new so they can get the warranty, so they can get it from the store that they're buying it from. So if they do have a problem, they can take it into that store, talk to the associate who sold it to them, and then get all the benefits that you get with buying new. You get to keep the box, you get all of those extra little benefits. Personally, I don't know if you should buy any of these Mac computers because they do have a slightly bigger premium just because of the fact that they're all new. So I want to get that out of the way if I do say something in this video because I prefer to purchase stuff used. But which iMac should you buy? Or which Mac should you buy, I should say. So really, with the two Macs we're looking at right now are going to be the Mac Mini and the iMac. Every other computer, you can't really compare it. Obviously, the iMac Pro is way too expensive. The Mac Pro is way too old. And then the MacBook Pros are MacBook Pros. They're not desktop computers, they're laptops. And then the MacBook Air, and any other iPad or whatever you want to throw in that category, you can't really compare them. So we're going to be looking at an iMac versus a Mac Mini. And just about 2 weeks ago, I released a video sort of about this exact topic where I was saying, what should you do if you want to buy a new Mac in 2019, Mac Mini or iMac? And what I said was what I thought the best price performance, it was not the cheapest, but what was the best price performance was to buy an i5 Mac Mini for $1,100 with a 256 gigabytes of storage, add an eGPU, and then add whatever graphics card you want, an RX 580, yada, yada, yada. But I've definitely changed my mind on this, and I kind of think that these new iMacs have sort of rendered the old Mac Minis not useless, but making them look like they are more expensive than they probably should be. So let's look at the iMac that I want to talk about specifically, and that is the 6-core i5 iMac. I'm going to have to read the specs off because I can't memorize them because I'm not that smart. This one is the 6-core i5. I believe it's an 8500B. It looks to be the same exact processor as the Mac Mini that has the 3.0 gigahertz boosting up to 4.1 gigahertz. They both go from 3.0 to 4.1, so I imagine they're probably the same processor. That's normally how Apple does it. They don't give you a processor name. They just tell you the clock speed and how many cores. Next, it comes with 8 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM, a Radeon Pro 560X with 4 gigabytes of GDDR5 memory, a 1 terabyte Fusion drive, a Magic Mouse 2, and a Magic Keyboard for $1,500. Now, when you compare this to the Mac Mini, the big differences that I see are obviously you get a computer and you get everything else you would need with the iMac, but when you look at the raw specs, there are a few glaring issues. One of them is the RAM. Now, the RAM in the 2017 21.5-inch iMac was technically upgradable, but you did have to remove the screen, which I'm not a huge fan of doing. I know people have done it. I know it can be done, but it's an expensive thing to replace, and you do potentially risk your life if you were to touch that power supply. I'm just saying, I know you probably would be fine, but you definitely lose out on the easy RAM upgrades. I know with the Mac Mini, you have to disassemble it slightly, but it's probably a much easier upgrade to the Mac Mini compared to the iMac because you're not risking a $500, $600, $700 screen in the process. Next is obviously a dedicated graphics card with the iMac. For $400 more, you're getting a dedicated graphics card, now a mobile dedicated graphics card, but a dedicated graphics card nonetheless that does have metal support. That's going to really help if you're using Final Cut Pro or pretty much any Apple-based app because they really do heavily rely on metal, and AMD, and with Apple's help, has really pushed metal to like the next generation with Apple's help. The processor obviously is the exact same. The storage is slightly different. You get less storage on the Mac Mini. For $1,099, you get 256 gigabytes of really fast SSD storage, some of the fastest SSD storage that you can buy in like a pre-built computer. But then with the iMac, unfortunately, you're stuck with a 1 terabyte Fusion drive. Now, this can be upgraded for $100 to a 256 gigabyte SSD, and I'm not sure if that is a SATA SSD or if that's one of Apple's NVMe SSDs or if that's just soldered to the motherboard. There's not a ton of information out, and by the time I'm filming this video, I haven't been able to find anything about that. But I'm assuming it's probably going to be SATA, but it might, I'm not 100% sure if I'm being honest, but it probably won't be quite as fast as the Mac Mini SSD. Although, keep in mind, for $100 more and that front, I can see why you would probably want to do that upgrade. And then the last and probably the most important thing are the speakers. No, not really. The speakers are actually much better in the iMac. But the screen, you're getting a 4K screen that's very, very good. Keep in mind, this is Apple calibrated screen. Personally, I'm a big fan of it. Obviously, other people might disagree with me, but in my opinion, I'm a big fan of that 4K screen. I think that you don't need that many pixels, but the colors look great. I do like Apple's coloring in their monitors. So you look at this Mac Mini that I said was the best purchase. I think a lot of people sort of agreed with me because the jump to the i7 was a little bit more expensive and didn't make a ton of sense. Like, yeah, you lost hyper-threading, but you didn't lose a ton of performance because of the thermal issues. And then they released this new iMac with a 6-core i5, the exact same one, dedicated graphics, not upgradable RAM, technically upgradable, but not upgradable. And then the Fusion drive along with a 4K screen for $400 more, and you get a keyboard and mouse. So it really is sort of dating the Mac Mini. I love that Mac Mini, actually. I'm a big fan of it. I made a bunch of videos on it. But right now, I can't suggest purchasing the Mac Mini in 2019 because this iMac that you can buy with a 6-core processor and a dedicated graphics card. Now, the dedicated graphics card isn't great, but it should probably be good enough to power that 4K screen. Not going to be the best experience of all time, and you might see some type of lag a little bit, but it's not the 5K screen, and the difference between 5K and 4K is actually quite large. I believe it's more than twice the amount of pixels. I'm sure I'll put right here if I was wrong, but it's almost twice the amount of pixels, and it's pretty much harder to run. And this Radeon Pro 560X is a mobile chip, so cooling should be relatively good on this iMac. I mean, that processor they put inside of that does seem to be a desktop class, and that's going to get a little bit warmer than like the processor they use inside of some of their MacBook Pros, but they have a much thicker chassis to deal with inside of that iMac. So I would suggest purchasing that iMac. All in all, I'm really excited that Apple did finally update these computers. A lot of them are good purchases, these new iMacs. I probably wouldn't buy any of them, but if you are looking for a new computer from Apple, this is probably the one to buy. The Mac Mini is really cool. It makes a lot of sense if you want to spend less money and be able to have a portable computer, like take it to a hotel. You're welcome, GOP. But if you don't need something like that and you just need a desktop computer that you don't need to be portable and you can spend about $1,500, I would say that computer I laid out is the one you should buy. And honestly, if you're willing to spend any more than $1,500, every Mac that you should buy that's a desktop should be an iMac. This is weird because I'm not a big fan of the iMacs, but they kind of fixed a lot of my complaints with these ones. I'm not super pumped with the Fusion drive still, and the non-upgradable RAM, I'm assuming on the 21.5 inch, but all in all, it's making the Mac Mini not look like the greatest purchase in 2019 right now, especially considering all of the benefits and all the extra stuff you get with the iMac. I mean, those Magic Mice and the Magic Keyboard, that's like almost a $200 value if you were to sell that on like eBay, maybe slightly less, but even at like $150, you bring your cost down another $150 and you could use a plug-in keyboard and mouse. Obviously, you might want to keep those, and I would suggest purchasing a trackpad if you're going to buy a Mac because the experience is much better. But it's kind of a no-brainer to buy an iMac instead of the Mac Mini. I know it's kind of weird to say that because I'm not a big fan of the iMacs, but they kind of fixed a lot of the problems that I had with them, and I can't say that they're not a good buy. That would be dishonest. The Mac Mini does have advantages. It's cheaper still, and you can choose your own monitor, and you can choose your eGPU, you can choose your graphics card, you can get a better graphics card. But for somebody that just wants an all-in solution, that wants a pretty good screen, that just wants something that they don't have to upgrade themselves, I would say the iMac is worth it. Now, when you start to get to the more expensive territory, you need to remember that those graphics cards that they put inside of them, I believe, are all mobile graphics cards. So the CPUs are the same CPUs as in the Mac Minis until you get to the 9th gen, which have the 8-core. And then when you get to that point, I would say that those iMacs are better than the iMac Pro because they should perform better in every single video export due to Intel QuickSync that Intel incorporates on all of their iSeries chips and not on all of their Xeon processors. So it's an interesting lineup this year. There's so much to go into, and I tried to cover as much as I could, but an iMac might not be the worst buy ever. Please do not buy that 2017 crap that they still are selling for like $1,100. That thing's a joke. If you want to spend $1,100, I would suggest getting the Mac Mini, but at $1,500 and above, I would say probably go with the iMac, and maybe even at $1,300, consider looking at the cheaper iMac, but I would probably say lean towards the Mac Mini. I really think that iMac at $1,500 is the price point. So I think what you're looking at is between like $1,000 and $1,500, go with an iMac. And then after that price point, you're probably going to want to go back into a Mac Mini, because you could piece together a Mac Mini with the i5 6-core, an eGPU, a decent screen, and then like an RX 580 for like $2,000, and that's going to be a better performer in almost any regard compared to like a $2,000 iMac. But then once you get to like the $3,000 range, you're going to want to look at just getting an iMac. And then once you get to the $4,000 range, I would still consider just sticking with an iMac. And even the $5,000 range, don't go with an iMac Pro. Still stick with the iMac if you are a video editor. And if you're not, maybe take a look at the iMac Pro, because of the Xeon chips. They do have advantages in certain situations, but it might not be exactly what you need. A video editor is definitely going to rely heavily on Intel's QuickSync, as mentioned before. That's going to be more important in the Core i series chips compared to the Xeon chips. That's just my opinion. Can't believe I'm saying that, because there are still some things that I'm not in love with. The design's a little bit old, the cooling's not going to be great, and the terabyte Fusion drive is kind of a joke still. But Apple did fix a lot of the mistakes that they had made. I wish, unfortunately, they just would have included an i5 8400 in the lowest end model instead of an i3 4-core chip. It seems like they were like, well, we can't give them the 6-core one that's that cheap because we're going to be screwed. And I think that they just sort of, I don't know. I mean, for what you get in the step up, it doesn't seem to be worth the extra money that you have to spend. But, oh well. I'm Scott with Techno Eclipse. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Jeez, I stumbled over my words. Peace out.